Alright, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of The Adventures of the Monk and the Monarch, starring me, the Monarch, and my co host, Mildra the Monk.
Hello.
So, when we get into our topic proper today, we're going to be talking about Four Kids, kind of as a companion piece of sorts, I guess, to when we talked about ADV films a while back.
You know I love contrast.
Yeah. But until we get into that, might as well start off with what we've been watching for the past month.
All right. And as usual, I will open these kind of things up. So, not too long ago, myself and the Parliament crew finished Obsolete. I kind of wish it had gotten more than one season. The final episode is the biggest bit of tonal whiplash we ever got. Like it it only makes sense till the end, and I feel like I got trolled. But Obsolete, it's not it if you like focusing on on characters and character arcs. This isn't that kind of story. The character that is really the focus is the setting itself. It is doing a high concept take on the effect of this new technology in the form of having viable mechs through a technology that people don't understand, but are being given out just by trading 1 ton of limestone. Which, if you know anything about anything, limestone is easy to get. And what's fully explored is the political and economic effects of it, especially when the more developed nations sign an agreement to not utilize that tech, where the less developed nations don't have that problem, and creates what seems to be a growing tension between northern and southern nations. But unfortunately, it doesn't get a chance to fully explore it. Although some of that is self-inflicted, because there's a few episodes that are self-contained stories, instead of focusing on what's supposed to be the main cast. Uh, but it was the first one that we were actually divided on. I still liked what I saw, and I would have liked to see more. But it came out during that time when YouTube was trying to really push the whole YouTube originals thing, and every single one of those YouTube originals only got one season. I know some people will bring up Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai lucked out, and every season after the first was handled by Netflix. But it was the exception, not the rule. The now, beyond that, the current show that we're going through is Kaiba, which how do I describe Kaiba? Well, first off, it's a Masaki Yuasa piece. We are going to have to do an episode on Masaki Yuasa one of these days.
I looked over his his Wikipedia real quick a while back, and I realized I have somehow missed out on almost everything this guy has done. So I'd love to do a piece on him, but that one's gonna be a ways off.
Yeah, Yuasa. There's a lot of things you can say about his style of directing and writing, but his style is not going to be forgettable. I can guarantee you that every time an animation studio contacts him, I worry I'm going to see some tentacled monstrosity come out of his head, because he likes surrealism, and he really likes bizarre imagery and storytelling. And Kaiba is no exception, where it's doing a high concept idea of memories being able to be uploaded and switched between bodies. But the visual style of Kaiba can best be described as, what if Osamu Tezuka and Dr. Seuss collaborated? That's the best way for me to describe it. It has a very storybook feel, but it has a storybook feel in that bizarre way of those two.
Now, while I have not seen this, I kind of have an idea in my head of what you're talking about, and I think I can think of at least one show that tries something like that, or like that kind of visual style, going badly. was an anime called Pet.
I remember hearing about it, and I remember it not being well received.
There's a reason for that. Like, on one hand, like they're doing the thing where they're diving into people's minds and it's creating like these worlds based off like weird principles that the show has attempted to set up. But it's kind of that thing where it's full of all of this strange and bizarre imagery, where you have a psychic who's trying to like track down someone's mental lock to figure out like how to break into their peaks and valleys, whatever that's supposed to be. Been a while. But one guy said, it's like, all right, yes, it's true. You probably have a very strong and secure lock, but because you make your lock so strong and put so much effort for it, it stands out in this world. You see that dog walking around underwater? It doesn't belong here. That's obviously your lock. 2 minutes ago, I saw a giant baby crashing through a giant haunted house trying to crush people. That dog is not weird in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. This isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't doing it like that.
Yeah.
The idea is there's a device that's in everybody's head. You take that out, you put that device in another body, and all the memories are going with it. Bodies are essentially repositories for these things.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, from a visual style, it sounds like it's one of those things, like, if you go too far with it, there is a point you're going to break immersion and everything's just going to start to look silly.
Oh, I would think that's the case, but because of these, this isn't that is for as crazy as Yuasa can get. There is always a method to his madness. If you want a bite-sized look at how crazy he can get, I'd recommend the film Mind Game, where one of the more normal things is it is all about him. It is all about the protagonist learning to seize the day, but how that is interpreted is there's a lot of variety within that, including one moment where he literally outruns God. But
the normal show he made.
Well, it was a movie. It was actually his first movie, and a lot of the reasons why he went that weird is because he wanted to see how far he could stretch the concept of it counting as animation. In that regard, it kind of reminds me of the Looney Tunes short Duck Amuck, where they're like, how much of this can we change and have it still be Daffy Duck? And well, I think that's how Chuck Jones had described it. And well, Duck Amuck is considered the best Looney Tunes short of that golden age. But outside of that, I have been looking at Trigun Stampede, and I have a feeling that Trigun Stampede is going to be divisive. And I know I said this in the past, but but after seeing 2 episodes, I need to hammer it home a little bit further. Because you're going to see 2 particular camps when it comes to Trigun Stampede. I would say a lot of the people who are rejecting it, their only exposure to Trigun is the anime from the 90s, and very little else. And because of the fact that it isn't trying to replicate that, even though what Stampede seems to be trying to do is a mix of elements between the anime and the manga, they're going to hyper focus on it not being like the anime. The other thing, and I think I know the reason why it's trying to go for this mixed bag. Naito does not have a high opinion of his first few volumes of Trigun, or and by his own admission, he didn't quite in the early volumes of Trigun, he didn't quite grasp the concept of visual storytelling. For a bit of context, before he became a mangaka, he was an architect, and he's called some of the stuff that he did for early Trigun nonsensical or incomprehensible, and I think he's mostly referring to the idea. He didn't quite get. He had a visual idea of what Trigun was to look like, but in terms of the sequential art of storytelling in a manga, he didn't quite grasp that yet. He would later, but it was a learning experience. Yes. I've seen a lot of people bitch about the fact that Vash doesn't have the same code as he did in the past. For one, in the manga, Vash didn't have that code as much as people think. 2, if I'm being honest, I think that coat would have been absolute hell to animate in CG animation.
Like, I have no problem with the code design. I have realized one thing about my thoughts on just what I've seen of Trigun Stampede. Like, I haven't
Mhm.
sat down to watch it yet, and I realize where a source of my like hesitancy to look too positively on it has been, and it is incredibly stupid and petty. I hate that fucking haircut. It's I know, like I'm still gonna watch the show. I still think a lot of
Although
it looks good, but God, I hate that haircut.
I I th- I look at that as a concession of the fact that that Studio Orange is doing CG animation,
Yeah.
and the way I would describe their animation style is if somebody took the animation style you see in say the last three Guilty Gear games and use that as a base. That's what it heavily reminds me of. I know a lot of people panicked when the director had said that they took inspiration from Disney. Let's be honest about one thing. Any anime director saying that they took inspiration from Disney is redundant
Yeah.
because to fucking Tezuka took inspiration from Golden Age Disney. That being said, I can now that I've had a chance to see a good amount of the animation, which for the record is fucking
Yeah.
gorgeous in terms of how things are animated. I can see where they were going with because the way Vash moves feels like the movement styles you would see in that golden age. We're talking 1950s, 1960s era Disney animation where everything is still animated on ones. Have I explained to you the whole animated on ones versus twos?
I don't think you have.
This is the idea of that is if you're animating on ones, that's one unique picture per frame of animation. So you're dealing with say 25 to 30 frames per second. So for every frame per second of that animation, you have one unique picture. Animating on twos, a lot of TV anime does, is one unique picture for every other frame, which is why you usually have less mobile but highly detailed imagery and a lot of TV anime in that same regard. And yeah, there's the whole cell reuse, but you don't see cell reuse as much as you did back in the 90s.
But yeah, Trigun is it's gonna be one of the first ones that's out this year. I'm planning to jump.
Yeah, it's again, I feel it's going to be divisive between those who actually give it a chance and those who just write it off because of an unreasonable standard.
Yeah.
And I know that some people were pissed off about Millie not being in this. If I'm being honest, the dynamic between the old man who does show up instead and Meryl, Millie just would not fit in this particular scenario.
Like I'm sad Millie's gone because I love Millie.
I like
But
Millie
yeah,
too, but I'm a realist, and the way that the dynamic in this story is set up, she you would end up having as the saying goes a spare prick at the wedding. I will also note that I have gone through the first couple episodes of Nier Automata version 1.1. It certainly looks the way I'd expect it to. What I'm more looking for is how it's going to deviate or add to the story of Nier Automata, because if it just plays the story straight in anime form, then that would be a disappointment. Episode 1 played it mostly straight. Episode 2 didn't. In fact, episode 2 focused more on on a machine life form that learned about flowers, which, because this is a Yoko Taro story, and ends a bit bittersweet. I'm acting more cautious with Nier Automata than I was with Trigun Stampede. I'll put it that
yeah.
way. And lastly, I did finish season 1 of The Witch from Mercury. I'm not going to go into details on the end, but it was very hilarious watching certain people's reaction where they thought, this will be a fun cute little Gundam story with lesbians. Nope. This is still a Gundam show, and you know things are going to be interesting when I'm comparing Soletta Mercury to Dexter Morgan.
And here's just a kind of odd random question for you. When it comes to shows that like start at the end of last year, but like half of it goes into this, what year do you count that show from?
I treat that the way I treat the year basis for NFL seasons. It's both. But since I don't do some year in review shit, I'm not fucking Gigic. I don't have to worry about that distinction.
I mean, I still do my year-end top tens just because it's kind of fun for me.
For what it's worth, I had thought about doing a year-end top 10 when it comes to tabletop, but I realized it would be impossible.
That would be a lot harder to do. The only actual anime I've had time to watch this past month is I made it through the Summit War Saga of One Piece. That was a lot of One Piece in 1 month.
How many episodes a day did you go through?
I ended up out for a few days, so just like out of commission for a couple days out of the month. So in like 2 days, I watched so many episodes.
And people said I was crazy for going through the entirety of Fairy Tail in 2 months while biking.
I mean, back when I was younger, I had a full weekend off, and I got through all of Monster in like 3 days. I don't really do that kind of shit anymore. I have too much else to do. But yeah, it's a lot of One Piece this past month. Few things I've kind of taken note of. Like, the Amazon Lily arc, overall, I thought was one of the weakest arcs of the show so far. And I kind of started to piece together why. Luffy, on his own, isn't really that interesting. The other side of that coin, you get to the Marineford arc a bit later, where like a good chunk of it is just the Whitebeard guys fighting with the government. While there's a lot of interesting characters and the action's pretty great, it wasn't that interesting until Luffy shows up. I don't think Luffy has to have the Straw Hat crew specifically, because Impel Down was great. He bounced off Buggy really well. I liked seeing the Wax guy back of all people. But yeah, Luffy really is central to everything going on in One Piece. Like, not just in terms of the writing, but like, even just the world around him is just better for him to be there, and vice versa.
I can certainly get that, especially since the times where Luffy could be on the interesting scale is tied to things around him, is tied to characters around him, whether it be his relationship with Shanks, the fact that his father is one of, if not the most notorious anti-government terrorists in the world, actually fuck it, we'll throw in both of his brothers in this case, and the baggage that they have.
I did not know there was another brother.
Whoops.
Oh wait, was it from like that flashback thing, or is this a different character entirely?
Different entirely.
Yeah.
You'll see him eventually. Yeah. You already know about Ace. The thing of it is, you end up with situations where you need to have other people around him in order for him to show his strengths, character wise. I'm not in the same position that that brother Zan is in, where he views him as a comedy character in a shonen battle manga, but I do understand why he has that position.
I really like Luffy so far. He may be my favorite shonen, just of these really long running shonen battle shows. He's just inherently likable at every moment. That said, I don't think I'd put him in even like my top 4 favorite characters of the Straw Hats.
You have that issue of everybody else outshining him because of that baggage that they all have.
Like, I think Brook has now solidly replaced Frankie at my 3rd favorite. Like, the moment he starts playing Bone to be Wild, I don't know why that's the moment I decided, no, he's just my boy now.
Yeah, everybody likes Brook. I at one point had made a drinking game out of all of his puns.
Oh god! But
that only lasted about 2 days before I realized if I keep this up, I'm gonna fucking die.
Sanji still a solid number 2 for me, largely just because I'm still convinced Oda has worked in a kitchen at some point in his life. You cannot convince me otherwise.
I do find it amusing that he claims that DiCaprio and Buscemi were the inspirations for Sanji.
I mean, now that that's been said out loud,
Well, it's not like I'm saying anything
yeah,
new.
yeah,
This has been known for
yeah.
years.
I have managed to avoid almost everything One Piece related until I started watching it. Don't know how I
Plus,
pulled that one off.
Oda is very interesting, especially when you factor in the way he responds to fan letters that he gets. The whole thing about a man's dream, because somebody got on his case about his characters having too much booba. But if you look at the way he designs characters, there is always some degree of ridiculous exaggeration with everybody. Not exactly fair to single out one aspect.
The other thing I'll note about One Piece is I wrote a bit about this a while ago, but One Piece gets away with something a lot of shows I've seen have done that have pissed me off. And that's how some shows have a tendency to like almost propel their stories forward through so much bullshit coincidence. Sometimes it's handled well, sometimes not, but I've kind of pieced together why it works better in One Piece than anything else I can think of. And that is the bullshit is 100% fair. How I would describe this is Luffy making his way through Impel Down. He just happens to go in at the time Buggy's making his great escape. All the way down to, oh, by the way, he just stumbles across the revolutionary down the floors.
If I'm being honest, that kind of thing is a lot more common than people think in
Yeah.
situational comedy. Even in the days of vaudeville, of the hero just having ridiculous bullshit amount of luck.
There is kind of a point where it can get ridiculous. It depends, of course, on the tone of the show to an extent. But where One Piece, I think, gets away with it more than others would is all of this that I'm applying to Luffy applies equally to Blackbeard. He went through this arc basically with the same degree of nonsense protecting him. He almost got wiped out by the poison, but because Luffy had been invading Impel Down at the time, which led to them releasing the jailer from the bottom, Blackbeard managed to make it out alive. Like, if I were to do like a full list of all of the things side by side for both of them, yeah, this luck and coincidence doesn't just apply to the heroes. And I think that kinda helps make it a lot better to not like stop me from being able to take everything seriously. Because as silly as this show is, it is very easy to get invested and take what's going on seriously.
Somebody did make a very interesting One Piece D20 project, which I hope to explore later this year, along with a few others. One of these days, I do want to do a deep dive on World Seeker and Odyssey. A lot of times when we get games based on anime, they're always party fighters.
Yeah. The reason I tried to get through like the Summit War of One Piece so quickly is because I picked up Odyssey. And I know it was like the post-training arc designs that were being. And it's one of those things I didn't want like little things to eke out from the story that might spoil something more interesting. I did stop because I found out it's going to get into stuff that happened in the Wano arc. For what I played through, it's a lot of fun. Few interesting ideas for the battle mechanics to keep it feeling different than other turn-based RPGs beyond just the fact it's One Piece characters. Written by Oda, so it definitely feels like a One Piece story being told. But yeah, it connects to other arcs just because you're diving back into their memories to recover power that was drained away once they hit this island. Though the events don't happen exactly as they did when they were there. The first one you dive into is Alabasta.
Mm-hmm.
Minor change to the story, but it's enough that it will spoil stuff for you regardless of like the changes they make. And they're coming into it like they didn't lose their memories, so they already know the event took place. So you're seeing their reactions to these stories as they are after the Wano arc. Create some really interesting moments. If you have not caught up on One Piece, do not play this game.
I think for a lot of people, that's going to be too little, too late.
Yeah. But yeah, for anyone who was thinking, well, maybe I'll give this a shot if I want to jump into... No. This game was made for people who are already fans of Piece, and nobody else.
The funny thing is, you know how there's the whole debate about which part to start with when it comes to JoJo?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have this problem with the last two video game adaptations of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. All-Star Battle goes through truncated versions of each story. Eyes of Heaven is one giant crossover moment. And because it's a crossover moment, much like crossover moments in Doctor Who, it's going to get retconned anyways. So just fly by the seat of your pants.
But as I said, though, like, I haven't gotten too far into this playthrough yet. Like, I did get to where you visit the far pole. I think that's where I stopped playing earlier. I guess now it's time to look back at 4Kids animation. This is
4Kids Entertainment or 4. I think last time they were calling themselves 4K Media. I guess to stay ahead of the law, or the fact that the name 4Kids had become such a pejorative that that it was becoming toxic. Depending on who you ask, there'll either be a little bit of devil's advocate being played, or you will see outright rage. I'm going to be spending a lot of this episode giving them shit.
Oh yes, it's 4Kids.
So
how can you not give them shit?
Before I do any of that, let me get the one nice thing out of my system. The TMNT reboot that we got in 2002 was pretty damn good. For the first few seasons, at the very least. It kind of overstayed its welcome after a few seasons worth. But at the very least, it didn't have a final season that annoyed me as much as the Red Sky era of the original. And even with that, how much of that is thanks to 4Kids, or in spite of them, is a conversation for another day. It was definitely a palate cleanser, given the last thing that we got that was Turtles related on television, that being Next Mutation, which Peter Laird absolutely despises, especially Venus. I'm pretty sure he'd probably get into a fist fight with Haim Saban if he could get away with it. Eastman is willing to talk about it, but I don't know how he feels on it. Obviously, I'm not going to ask because I'd rather not poke that bear.
I'm kind of of two separate minds on 4Kids in general. On one hand, they're shit. They were just bad at this.
There is one other thing I will play a slight amount of devil's advocate, but only slight, and that is having a hand in reintroducing Ultraman to a new generation with the dub of Tiga. It was not a very good dub, that it fucking sucked, but A for effort at the very least. Or good effort, have some steak. So those two elements, and I've done this joke in the past, but I'm going to put those in a bubble. And I'm going to move them right into the corner over here. So everything I say does not reflect on that because it's in its bubble. Now, that being said, Alcon, the head of 4K Media, is one of the few people I know who got booed out of a Comic-Con. Have I told you this story?
No. I had no idea that happened.
He was at New York Comic-Con years ago. I'm not sure what the question was in the matter, but somebody asked him a question, and his response was, "Kids don't read; they read less today." And there was audible hissing from the crowd because several people within that crowd were representatives of the New York Public Library Association. It wasn't a case where he got booed off the stage and got tomatoes and bricks thrown at him, although I'd have paid to see that. Afterwards, he had walked back his comments, or at least attempted to. Everybody knows about all of the changes that were made to Yu-Gi-Oh! And One Piece. Yeah. And in hindsight, it's kind of amusing looking back at old articles when there was an old forum post when there was a genuine fear that 4Kids would get its hands on Naruto. Obviously, that didn't happen. Considering all the blowback they were getting from their early run with One Piece, it's understandable why there was that concern. Although the funny thing is, there was a heavily censored version of Naruto, and it was worse than what 4Kids could have done. I'm referring to the German version, the German dub that decided to take the entire blade from Zabuza's sword, for instance. I'm not kidding.
Huh.
And it wasn't like they replaced it with a foam finger or something. No, they just took the whole thing out. But the argument that was often made, and for things like the jelly donuts or for some reason he just couldn't wrap his head around rice balls, was they needed to make anime more Western so that younger audiences would understand it. I've seen a similar argument about how stuff like The Office at all had to be remade because Americans wouldn't get British humor. If it's really the case, why are there so many American fans of Doctor Who even when I was a little kid? Same thing applies to Red Dwarf. And of course the elephant in the room being Monty Python. So this whole idea that it has to be changed so that I'm only willing to accept that claim insofar as certain in jokes that don't work
Yeah.
in English. An example when it comes to this whole lost in translation thing, to the point where when it came stateside they didn't even try to do this, is Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, a very very good comedy anime that managed to include a plot twist in a story that had no plot. Furematsu kure tokiro ni sumo kotoro Yubara Koji no Burakoji, Paipo Paipo, Paipo Paipo no Shuringan no Gurindai no Pobokongi, Pomokonko, Kokomen no Shoke. I fucked that up. I'm going to this is a Rakugo story, and the whole idea with Rakugo is a whole lot of syllables in the least amount of time. It is meant to be like a Japanese tongue twister from hell. Trying to make this into English doesn't quite work because the whole point of the gag is it's an in joke to a story that is very Japanese. There's the full text. I just sent it to you if you want to try for it. Trying to
Alright, I gotta try this. I'm gonna butcher the hell out of this. Jugemu Goku no Surakiri Kaijari Suigoyo no Suigoyo Matsu Yuriamatsu Shurigan no Gurundai no Ponpoku. Yeah. Okay, I fucked that up very badly at the end. Probably multiple times throughout.
There's one variant where Jugemu got into a fight. The person who he fought with had a large bump on his head. He went crying to his parents, but due to how long it took for him to pronounce the name, the bump had already healed by the time he finished. This kind of gag, you can't really do in English. I just double-checked the name of the protagonist in Zetsubo Sensei. I couldn't remember the name off the top of my head. It's Nozomu Itoshiki. The point is that we've seen this kind of thing when it comes to the localization debate about how much needs to be changed in order to present it to a non-Japanese audience. There is always the false flag that people are arguing for literal 100% translation. No one is arguing that. The only people who bring that up are people who are arguing in bad faith. I don't think anybody wanted that when it came to the likes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or One Piece or Shaman King. But what was wanted instead was to have and this is the thing when it comes to localization, to have the closest equivalent to the same experience.
You did have your bigger cable networks would occasionally air your animes, like Adult Swims came along.
They were airing on Fox.
A lot more people could watch the stuff where for kidding than a lot of other stuff. Like, I certainly wouldn't put them on the level of like ADD for their importance. They were still there for introducing a lot of people to anime.
Yeah. And a lot of it was on either WB or Fox,
largely because of 4Kids connection.
Mm-hmm.
They could get stuff airing where a lot of other people wouldn't have been able.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not that's a good thing that was in 4Kids' hand is another story entirely.
I would say their big entry was having a stranglehold on the Pokemon anime just when the craze was really getting nuts in like 99. I talked a big deal about it, but the stuff with Pokemon was the least egregious, and I think that's because Nintendo / Game Freak had a bit more of a direct hand in things, even if they still allowed for the whole jelly donuts thing.
That will never not be hilarious.
I remember people sneaking in Onigiri into the premiere of Detective Pikachu and tweeting that joke. I realize this is a lot of me doing asshole theorizing, but that's the best assessment that I have as far as why those kind of things would be done. Besides the whole trying to make anime more Western, which ended up causing that divide that I know you saw and I saw as well, of trying to put a great wall between anime and cartoons. even in their heyday, Four Kids was kind of an out was the equivalent of an outlaw promotion, kind of like Saban.
They're more accessible TV spots. I think were largely what kept them going.
They may have had the TV spots, but it was becoming easier and easier to get DVDs. A lot of people forget that the early 2000s there was that massive boom of DVDs.
Like with ADV, where that was their heyday. They thrived on that.
They're in the business in all the way into VHS's. One moment. There's a whole lot that can be said about the way ADV, Pioneer, Bandai, and so on handled the DVD boom. The issue was the impact that Four Kids the Spot was having was becoming less and less. For starters, as the years went on, it became more and more accessible to get cable networks. Cable wasn't a case where you're only going to get it if you're doing black box stuff. There was no way they were going to be able to sustain themselves. For a while, they were a big fish in a small pond. Then the pond got bigger. I don't want to treat this like I'm treating their downfall as some tragedy like I did with ADV.
Yeah.
No, even if I gave all the concessions, they still built up way, way, way too much bad karma for themselves. Which is why I brought up the whole thing with the kids don't read line. I feel like that statement perfectly encapsulates why they were doomed. As far as the legacy, I think even as the years go on, while some things get a second examination with time. To use a good example, look at Metal Gear Solid 2. Everybody hated Raiden at first, and then as time went on, they realized what I knew about him. If they tried to do Metal Gear Solid 2 with Solid Snake on his own, it wouldn't have worked. But I don't think there's going to be any sort of re-examination of Four Kids' legacy with time. They've been irrelevant for, I'd say, since 2005, and there hasn't been an examination or any sort of retrospective look in a positive light on them. And I don't think that's changing because of the amount of bad karma they put upon themselves.
Like, I think the things I have said about them during this have probably been some of the nicest things said about them in years.
And even then, I could feel you stretching it in order to make it work.